Where do I have a final decision?
Is the Biden
All right, my
administration
friends, J.R.
upset
Dukes here. We are
by how
live
this is
at the
playing
White
out in
House.
fact, what those extremists
Press
are
Secretary
doing to Palestinians?
Jean-Pierre
Of course, the
and
president has spoken to
NSC
this many,
Coordinator
many times,
John
including
Kirby
from the
is speaking
Rose
live
Garden
right now, so
here
we're
with the
going to go right
Australian
into
Prime
it.
Minister, I mean, what's happening with the cellular violence is unacceptable, absolutely reprehensible. And yes, we wouldn't have talked about the potential examining visa bans. And again, no final decision here. If it wasn't just another clear statement of our deep concern over this.
What other sanctions are being considered besides the visa ban?
I don't have anything else.
Good, Annie. Oh, thanks so much. There's been fighting over the last few days and hours around the Indonesian hospital in Gaza.
Yeah.
Can you speak to whether or not there's U.S. intelligence that suggests that too is some sort of hub for Hamas activity, and what the U.S. feeling is about the reports of shelling in and near that hospital?
Hospitals should not be the scenes of firefights. We've been very clear about that. You got patients in there, you got medical staff, you got people whose lives are literally at risk and are innocent victims of this. They shouldn't be put at more risk than they already are, being held up in a hospital or holed up in a hospital because of health issues, can't move. So we don't want to see firefights in hospitals. I don't have any specific intelligence about the degree to which Hamas is or is not using that particular hospital. Nothing to share today.
John, I was just curious. You mentioned Hamas still determined to try to carry out any sort of terrorist attack abroad. This Thanksgiving week, is there any elevated risk of terror attacks here at home? And is the White House or NSC doing anything specific? Because of the holiday week, most people obviously kind of check out in D.C. I'm just curious, are you staffing up in a difference because of the terror threat?
We're not tracking any specific credible threat here at home over the holiday. That said, I think you can understand we're going to be as vigilant as we have been since this conflict began, and certainly make sure that we, to the best we can identify any potential domestic threats and disrupt them before they can take place. We're watching this all very, very closely for spillover effects from the fight between Israel and Hamas, both against the Jewish community and, of course, the Muslim community here in the United States. But again, I'm not tracking any specific credible threat that's being acted on at this time.
Back at the Indonesian hospital, my colleague spoke with the hospital administrator who said that President Biden needs to do more to protect hospitals in Gaza because, quote, he's the only one Netanyahu will listen to. Could you comment on that? And also, is the U.S. at all concerned that Israel is being seen, rather, as attacking one Gaza hospital after another, and also areas in the south now?
The president, in every conversation that he has with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and it's not just him, Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, Jake Sullivan, the whole team here, at every instance, continues to urge Israelis to be as cautious and as deliberate and as careful as they can in conducting these operations against Hamas, which they have a right and a responsibility to do, to go after Hamas. They also have a right and a responsibility, an added burden, if you will, because of the way Hamas fights, to do everything they can to look after civilian casualties. It is a part of every discussion that we're having with our Israeli counterparts. And I'm sorry, the second question was?
The second question was, is the United States at all concerned that Israel is seen attacking hospital after a hospital?
Well, as I said, I think in my previous answer, we don't want to see hospitals as battlegrounds. We don't want to see firefights in hospitals. Now, as we've also said, at least when it comes to Al-Shifa, I don't have any intelligence on this Indonesia hospital, but at Al-Shifa, we did have intelligence that corroborated the Israeli claims that Hamas was using it as a command and control node. So it puts an added burden on Israel as they conduct operations in and around hospitals to be even more discriminate and more careful. Because again, you got real live patients, real live doctors, real live nurses that you got to look out for. On the other hand, you've got a real life threat. You got a group that seems to think it's okay to bury themselves in the basement of a hospital and use it to command and control their operations. And that presents a viable, legitimate threat to the security of the Israeli people. So it's about striking that balance.
Thank you.
John, the White House condemned Elon Musk in pretty strong terms last week after he once again said something that was considered anti-Semitic. He called his comments abhorrent. This administration, this government, is very reliant on Elon Musk, particularly SpaceX technology, Starlink technology. Have there been any efforts made to wean the government off of his technology or find some kind of replacement for it?
I'm not aware of any efforts to do that, Nancy, but I think we've been very clear about the rhetoric and how inappropriate it is, and we'll call it out every time we see it.
But is the president concerned that the Pentagon and NASA are so reliant on someone who holds these views and appears to even more routinely embrace conspiracy theories?
We rely on a lot of the defense industry, a lot of the private sector to help us with our innovation, to help us with research and development on new systems, and to help us in the realm of space and cyberspace. There's a real benefit to private-public partnership when it comes to those kinds of national security threats and national security challenges. There's innovation out there in the private sector that we'd be foolish to walk away from. I'm not aware of any specific efforts to address our concerns over his rhetoric through the way that his companies provide support to our national security establishment. But that doesn't mean that we accept or agree with or condone in any way that anti-Semitic rhetoric that he pushed.
Good, MJ.
Thank you, John. Does the U.S. have any assessment of what the Israeli military is describing as CCTV footage of Hamas bringing through hostages through Al-Shifa Hospital on October 7th?
I don't.
Okay. On the hostages, if women and children end up being released first, which is what it sounds like the situation is probably headed towards, does the U.S. have any sense of how many in that mix might be American citizens?
I don't want to get ahead of where we are, MJ. I mean, I know that everybody's interested in the numbers and who they're going to be. We're working that through literally in real time with both sides. So I think it's better if I just don't speculate about what that pool's going to look like. Obviously, we are laser focused on the American citizens that we know are being held hostage, and we want them out. All of them. Everybody should be out now. But here we are in a negotiation, and we're getting closer to the end, we believe, of that negotiation. So again, I'm going to be careful.
For any of the potential American hostages, is there confidence that they are alive? I know that you've addressed the lack of proof of life videos and such in the past, but
I would say we have no indication otherwise.
Thanks, John. There was media reports over the weekend that U.S. pressure had resulted in the Palestinian Authority taking down a tweet that had accused Israeli helicopters of most of the deaths at that music festival. Can you elaborate on that at all?
No. I mean, I don't know. What would you want me to say to that?
I mean, can you confirm it? Can you give any information about what kind of communications there were between the U.S. and the Palestinian Authority about that messaging?
I'm not aware of any specific messaging between us and the PA on that. I mean, obviously, it's simply not true. There was Hamas paragliding into a music festival. I mean, there was no Israeli participation in that at all.
And then I just wonder if you can elaborate a bit on the president's remarks in the op-ed about a revitalized Palestinian Authority. Like, what would that look like? Is it new leadership? Is it a different structure? Could you just talk about that a little more?
It's, what it looks like is going to depend on the Palestinian people. But what he's referring to there is a Palestinian Authority that has the credibility, has the legitimacy, has the authority, has the support of all Palestinians, so that they can effectively help with post-conflict governance, particularly in Gaza. But what it actually looks like is really and should be up to Palestinians.
A couple more in the back. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Great. Hi, John. Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving to you. President Biden stood by calling President Xi a dictator at the APEC press conference. China's foreign ministry condemned this as, quote, extremely incorrect and irresponsible political manipulation. What is the administration's response or reaction to this?
We came away from San Francisco with some concrete deliverables on fentanyl, on military-to-military communications, on getting our two teams together to start working on artificial intelligence, particularly in the national security realm. There was an awful lot of very good outcomes out of this meeting between President Biden and President Xi, and the president's looking forward. We're looking forward to managing this relationship in a more responsible way and moving things forward, looking for ways where we can cooperate, but also not being afraid to confront where we can, including on the tensions in the South China Sea. So the president's and his whole national security team is focused forward now, coming out of San Francisco.
Still going to call him a dictator each time you see
The
him?
president made it very clear. He was asked a direct question. He gave a direct answer, and he stands by that direct answer. That doesn't mean, as true as that statement was, doesn't mean that there aren't still prospects here to find ways to cooperate and to compete with China in a more responsible way going forward, and that's where the president's head is.
When these two leaders met, did they agree to meet again or speak again in the near term?
They agreed that they would meet again, but there was no date put on the calendar. What's really important now is that the military-to-military comms will begin to start, and even down to the theater commander level, and maybe even lower than that. So that's the immediate channels of communication that we're looking at getting back open.
Thank you, Karine. I've got a question about fentanyl, then a question about the Gaza conflict. On fentanyl, the Chinese president committed to reducing the export of fentanyl and fentanyl precursors. But under President Biden, there have been 200,000 Americans who have stopped breathing and died as a result of these chemicals. As of earlier this year, we're still at record monthly numbers. If there is not a drop in American deaths, will President Biden hold the Chinese president personally responsible?
It was really significant what President Xi was willing to commit to for the first time now in several years. I mean, they're really going forward here and willing to take law enforcement action to shut down the export of these ingredients, the precursor chemicals that the labs, largely in our own hemisphere, are creating to make fentanyl. It's a big step forward, and we're grateful for that. And we'll see how they are in execution. And I think we all need to understand that it may be some time before you see the practical results of this crackdown on the precursors, but we're grateful for that. But it's not just the precursor chemicals. I'll try it again in English. But it's the labs in our own hemisphere that are taking those chemicals, those ingredients, making fentanyl, and then moving it north up to our borders. And it's a serious problem. And again, as the president said at the press conference, this agreement will save lives, will save American lives. And President Xi said he was committed to helping with that.
Before turning to the second question, just to follow up on that, the Chinese president's in charge of a single-party state. He's said in the past that he'd crack down on fentanyl, and U.S. deaths hit an all-time record last year. I mean, is President Biden not going to consider him personally responsible if American deaths do not go down?
He has said he was going to be personally responsible for stemming the flow of these chemicals out of China, and we're grateful for that. That's going to take a little bit of time as he goes back to Beijing and puts those processes in place, those law enforcement actions. We're grateful for that.
Thank you. And second question, protesters here in D.C., in New York, across the country, they've settled on a nickname for the president. They've been calling him Genocide Joe. They wrote it on the gates. Do you have a response from the White House to that nickname that they've settled on?
We're not worried about nicknames and bumper stickers. I mean, it's First Amendment, free speech. The president's focused on, as he wrote in his op-ed, on making sure that we can continue to support Israel as they fight a terrible terrorist group, Hamas, and as we all work together to get humanitarian assistance in and get people out, including hostages. I said this the other day. Again, people can say what they want on the sidewalk, and we respect that. That's what the First Amendment's about. But this word genocide's getting thrown around in a pretty inappropriate way by lots of different folks. What Hamas wants, make no mistake about it, is genocide. They want to wipe Israel off the map. They've said so publicly, more than one occasion. In fact, just recently. And they've said that they're not going to stop. What happened on the 7th of October is going to happen again and again and again. And what happened on the 7th of October? Murder, slaughter of innocent people in their homes or at a music festival. That's genocidal intentions. Yes, there are too many civilian casualties in Gaza. Yes, the numbers are too high. Yes, too many families are grieving. And yes, we continue to urge the Israelis to be as careful and cautious as possible. That's not going to stop from the president right on down. But Israel is not trying to wipe the Palestinian people off the map. Israel's not trying to wipe Gaza off the map. Israel's trying to defend itself against a genocidal terrorist threat. So when we're going to start, if we're going to start using that word, fine, let's use it appropriately.
Okay, way in the back.
I wanted to ask you about White House advisor Amos Hochstein's visit to Israel. Can you give us a sense of what the goal of these talks are? And does his visit signal that the White House is concerned about military action, Israeli military action in Lebanon? And then I have a follow-up.
Yeah, Amos is in Israel today to follow up on his last meeting to Lebanon about a week or so ago, where he talked to Lebanese officials and to Israeli officials up in the north about the risks of a second front, a northern front. And he's in Israel today, sort of back briefing his conversations with the Israeli counterparts there in Tel Aviv.
But in terms of a follow-up, is the White House concerned that Israel could be provoking Hezbollah?
We don't want to see this war escalate. We don't want to see it widen. We certainly don't believe it's in anybody's interest, certainly not the Israeli people's interest, to have a second front there in the north. What Amos is doing, what our team is doing, is everything we can to help prevent that scenario from happening.
How fearful are you that if this is something that is being provoked, that it could draw the United States into it, that is the goal of Israel right now?
Well, again, we don't want to see the conflict widen or escalate. That is why Amos is having the conversations he's having. That's why Secretary Blinken has now had 2 extensive trips to the Middle East, and it's why the president has put forward additional force posture. We are all talking about the carrier strike groups, but also air and missile defense, as well as fixed-wing aviation into the region, so that we can send a strong signal to any actor, nation state or otherwise, that if you're going to think about widening and deepening this conflict, don't do it.
Kirby?
Yeah, thank you. South Africa just submitted a referral to the ICC to investigate Prime Minister Netanyahu. Do you have any comments regarding that for war crime?
I'll tell you, I'm going to have to take that question. I have not seen that referral by South Africa. So before I go talking out of school here for our UN ambassador, we'll take that question and we'll get back to you.
Okay, I also a follow-up question. It's almost the 4th year anniversary of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. President Biden said he plans to travel to Africa within a year. Do you have any updates when the president will travel?
I do not.
Thank you.
Is there an assessment of the U.S. on the level to which Hamas has been degraded over the last several weeks?
We don't have an independent assessment that I'm aware of. That's a question better put to the Israeli Defense Forces.
It's something that I know that you have a lot of communications with the Israelis inside of their operation. Is that part of what the communications are between the I'm just trying to get a sense of sort of what the next steps are and how long a campaign this may need to be based on that level of degradation?
Those are all great questions for the Israeli Defense Forces. This is their operation. Now, yes, we're in touch with them daily, and they provide us their perspectives. They provide us updates. I'm not going to, from this podium, characterize those conversations. I'm certainly not going to quantify the degree to which Hamas has been degraded. They are continuing to go after their leadership, particularly in the north of Gaza, but really that's a better question for them.
Thank you so much. Has the president called the president-elect of Argentina, or does he plan to do so? And maybe a wider question, does the administration think that this president-elect is the right man to reform the economy in the country?
So on your first question, I don't have an update on the president's call sheet to talk about today, but obviously I'm sure Karine and her team will keep you informed as things progress. I probably saw there was a tweet by Jake Sullivan congratulating him on his win. We look forward to working with him in his administration. Argentina is a terrific partner in the region, and there's an awful lot of things we share in terms of values, value of democracy, human rights, and just hemispheric security and economic concerns that we'll look forward to working with him and his team on.
Joey, last question.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I know you've been careful on what you can say regarding the hostage negotiations, but are you able to confirm that we're talking, that they're centered on women and children, getting women and children specifically out?
I'd really rather not. But obviously, as I said in my opening statement, we want to see specifically, especially, we want to see the children and women get released. Obviously, that's a high focus for everybody, and of course, the Americans too, because we know there's at least one American toddler in that pool. But I think the less said, the better as we get into the, into the, what we hope is the end game here on negotiations. It's probably safer if I don't go into much speculating.
Hopeful that it's the end game. What are we, what kind of time frame are you looking at? I mean,
I couldn't tell you. Yeah. Just that we're closer now than we've been before. That's a good thing. But, we don't want to do or say anything publicly that's going to jeopardize what we hope will be a positive result.
thanks.
Yep. Thanks.
You're too long on your foot there.
Sprain or a break?
All right, now this is
I
the
don't wanna
actual
keep him
press
too long on his
secretary.
feet. Thank you so much,
Karine
Admiral. Appreciate
Jean-Pierre.
that. No, it's not
I think that's how you say your
comfortable.
name.
Will, go ahead.
Okay, I got a couple of things, changing gears. Will there be an order to lower flags to have staff to mark Mrs. Carter's passing, and is the president planning on attending her funeral?
So let me just say at the top, I know you heard from the President and the First Lady yesterday on the passing of the former First Lady. I just want to say certainly that their thoughts are with President Carter and the entire Carter family. As the President said yesterday, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter have been dear, longtime friends, and Rosalind Carter was an extraordinary, extraordinary First Lady. She was a champion for equal rights and opportunities for women and girls, an advocate for mental health and wellness for every person, and a supporter of the often unseen, uncompensated caregivers of our children, aging loved ones, and people with disabilities. The President and the First Lady are thinking of her and of him and keeping the Carter family in their prayers today as well. As it relates to any potential travel, the President and the First Lady plan to pay respects to the former First Lady. Don't have anything to share at this time on details or anything to confirm just yet, but certainly as we have information or more details to share, we certainly will share that with all of you. And as it relates to the lowered to half-staff, the flag being lowered to half-staff, yes, we will certainly do that, and we certainly will follow. We'll do that in accordance with protocols and details of when and how long that will happen. We certainly will share that at an appropriate time.
Okay, another topic. How is the president planning to mark his birthday? I ask because he mentioned it during the turkey party. It looks like he's got some family here. We're going to have like a party or a dinner.
So he's gonna do what they normally do, how they celebrate the president's birthday. There's a tradition, which they're going to keep to that tradition, which is they'll be able to celebrate the president's birthday as a family together in Nantucket later this week, and certainly we'll do that with coconut cake, which is something that they traditionally do.
Last year, we all remember the messy holiday travel season. I know the administration has taken steps to try to improve compensation for travelers who face delays and some other steps to hold airlines accountable. How confident is the White House that Americans won't face those same kind of issues this travel season?
Well, it's hard to predict, obviously, but certainly we take this very seriously. The Department of Transportation takes this very seriously, and so we're going to certainly keep eye on what's going on the next couple of days as Americans travel crisscross the country to get to their loved ones for Thanksgiving. And so, if any issues arise, obviously, the Department of Transportation, this administration will be on top of it. Hard to kind of surmise what that's going to look like, but as you said, we've taken this seriously, and we've taken actions to work closely with airlines, to work closely with other transportation means of vehicles, if you will, to make sure that Americans get to where they need to safely, certainly on time, as I know they want to get to on time, and so we'll certainly be vigilant and on top of it.
And if I could just ask one follow-up on Nancy's question. Some advertisers have pulled their ads from X, formerly known as Twitter. Is the White House at all considering suspending its official White House or the president's accounts on X given Elon Musk's comments?
So I don't have anything to announce at this time or any conversations, internal conversations on that particular question, but we've been very clear. You heard from this White House after those abhorrent, as you heard from us, comments were made by Elon Musk, and we are going to continue to certainly call that out, condemn those types of hateful comments that could be incredibly dangerous, and so we won't stop doing that. I just don't have any internal conversations to read out or announcement to read out on that particular platform.
Has anyone here spoken to Musk?
I don't have any conversations to read out, but we will continue to certainly condemn any type of hateful comments that, again, are dangerous. Okay, Steve.
How much more funding is available for Ukraine, the military packages?
So that is something I would certainly refer you to Department of Defense. They'll have more information on the specifics on that, on your particular question. But look, this is why we've been very clear about the supplemental, about asking for additional Ukraine funding so that the brave people of Ukraine continue to fight against the aggression that we've been seeing from Russia. They're fighting against tyranny, right? They're fighting against terrorism, right? When you think about Israel as well, and what Israel is doing and trying to fight against Hamas. And so that's why that supplemental, that national security supplemental for both are incredibly important. And we're going to continue to have those conversations with folks on the Hill about the importance of moving forward with the President's national security supplemental. I don't have any specifics on how much money is left. Certainly would refer you to the Department of Defense.
Secondly, the Commission on Presidential Debates just announced dates and locations for the debates next year. Will the President participate in it?
I would refer you to the campaign on that particular question. Thanks, Steve. Go ahead, Linda.
Karine, what does the White House make of Democrats and particularly young people who say they do not approve of the president's handling of the Israel-Hamas war?
So look, as I'm going to be mindful, right, because there's going to be a number of polls that are going to be coming out, which, obviously, which we respect, and obviously that is kind of the way that things go. But what I'll be very clear about is we're not going to govern by polls here. We're going to, or poll numbers. We're going to focus on delivering for the American people. That's going to be our focus. We're going to focus on how the president's going to, we believe, continue to deliver on what the American people sent him to do, right? Whether it's the economy. Let's not forget when the president walked into this administration, the economy was at a tailspin, and that was because of what the last administration did. And so we had small businesses were shut down, we had schools, majority of schools were shut down, large jobs were lost, and the pandemic was not under control. Now we understand the actions and the historic actions, legislations that this president has done is going to take some time. It's going to take some time. It's not like turning on a light switch for people to certainly feel that. But look, as it relates to recent polling, look, we're going to focus on what we can do. We're going to focus on governing. We're going to focus on making sure we continue to deliver. I'm not going to go point by point on each poll, but I just can speak to you about what our focus is going to be moving forward.
Then maybe polling aside, can you say whether this White House has a theory of the case on how you win over young people, whether it's on this conflict specifically or generally?
So look, as when we say win, I'm going to be very careful, right? Don't want to make sure I'm not speaking to 2024. That is something certainly that the campaign can analyze and speak to more broadly and how that looks for them and how it looks for that campaign, the president re-election. What I can say is we're going to continue focusing on delivering for the American people. That includes young people, right? That includes making sure that we meet them where they are, whether it's student loans, whether it's an economy that works for all and does not leave them behind. Those are the things that you see the president do day in and day out as we put forward policy plans, and that include young people as well. I'm going to leave any of the analysis, any of the specifics to any poll, to dozens of people, certainly on TV, right? It's kind of a cottage industry out there. They're going to analyze that. They're going to speak to that, leave that to them, leave that to the campaign to speak to winning young people or anything that's related to 2024.
Do you know what the president makes of the fact that so many young people are opposed to?
I mean, I can tell you this. The president is focusing on the job at hand. He truly is. He's focusing on how we're going to deliver for for the American people. That is his focus, and that's what he's been truly steadfast about in the almost 3 years of this administration. Okay, Nancy.
Thanks, Karine. How closely is the White House tracking what's going on at OpenAI, one of the most powerful companies in the AI sphere, the revolt there, mass resignations, and what does this mean for the recent executive order having to do with AI?
So on the first question, look, we're not going to comment on any private company. We never do, especially as it's changing any personnel decisions that they make as they make those changes. As it relates to the executive order, a very comprehensive executive order that the president announced not too long ago on AI, our message to tech companies continues to be clear. They need to assure AI systems are safe before releasing them to the public. We're going to continue to make that clear, have those conversations. But as it relates to personnel decision made by private company, we're just not going to comment from here.
And then sticking with the tech theme, Twitter is back in the news. I mean, not Twitter, TikTok back in the news because of misinformation about the war, about Osama bin Laden. It's now been more than 2 years that this CFIUS investigation has been underway. Can you give us any kind of update on where that stands?
As you know, it's an independent committee investigation. Just don't have anything to comment on that, on CFIUS and where they are on that investigation. Kedra.
Thanks, Karine. The senators are having some talks this week about an immigration deal that would unlock Ukraine aid. Is the White House planning to get involved with those, even sit in on them?
I'm just not going to negotiate from here. Okay.
You mentioned the president's excited to be celebrating his birthday, but I'm curious, David Axelrod told the New York Times, quote, Biden thinks he can cheat nature here and it's really risky. A, what's the president's response to David Axelrod? Does he respect his opinion? Does he think he's right? But also, I mean, is there a real alarm happening behind the scenes that the president is simply too old to stake around for another 4 years?
No, there's no alarm happening behind the scenes. I can only speak behind the scenes here. There's no alarm happening behind the scenes, and I'm certainly not going to comment on everybody who has something to say.
Nobody. I mean, David Axelrod
I didn't say that. Nowhere in my response to you that I said that. I said I'm just not going to comment on everyone that has a comment to say. They're going to speak for themselves. I'm going to speak for the president, and here what I'll say is, look. And also, it's just not my job. It's not my job to think through or to tell people what to think, right? Whether it's the American people out there or a political analyst or as your question is about David Axelrod. It's just not my place to speak to that. What I can speak to is how we see this, what our perspective is. Our perspective is that it's not about age. It's about the president's experience. That's what we believe. And it's, as they say, the proof is in the pudding, right? The president has used his experience to pass more bipartisan legislation in recent time than any other president. That's just a fact. That is something that we have seen this president do, and that's because of his experience. He's been able to manage multiple foreign policy challenges. He's been able to do that. That's because of his experience. He's been able to create jobs, raise wages, and lower inflation. Right, and the proof is in the pudding, right? We see that in the data. We see that where we are today than where we were when the president walked into the administration. So what we say is we have to judge him by what he's done, not by his numbers. And one more thing I will add: this is the first president ever that's been able to go to an active war zone without our military, controlling what's happening on the ground. And so, look, I would put the president's stamina, the president's wisdom, ability to get this done on behalf of the American people against anyone on any day of the week. All right, go ahead.
Thanks, Karine. I just wanted to follow up. I wondered if you had any update on whether the president or anybody else in the administration plans to attend the COP28 summit in Dubai next week.
We don't have anything to read out on his schedule. Okay, Karen.
Thanks. You just told Jordan you wouldn't negotiate on the supplemental from here, but you and Kirby before you have talked today just about how important it is to get this funding through. So now that Congress doesn't have an urgent deadline until next year because of the CR getting passed, how concerned is the White House that this is not going to get through in a timely manner? And what is the president going to do in the next couple of weeks to try to push this through?
So look, again, I'm not going to get into negotiations from here, as you stated in your question, but I will say this, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake as you think about our national security and also our domestic needs. So it is crucial, it is important that we get this done. And so we're going to continue to have conversations. Our legislative affairs shop here, our OMB director is going to continue to have conversations with members of the Hill. So yeah, it is important. We wouldn't have put it forward if we didn't think it was needed, right? These are emergency needs that we requested when you think about the supplemental, both the domestic one and the national security. So obviously, we're going to continue to have that conversation. We're going to continue to do it in a bipartisan way, do it both with Republicans and also Democrats on the Hill. And so we take this very seriously. We wouldn't have put it forth if we didn't think it was needed.
Will we see the president get personally involved engaging with lawmakers right after the Thanksgiving holiday?
Don't have any layout or readout about who the president's going to call. As you know, the president has personal relationships, long-time relationships with many members in Congress. And so, certainly he has done that before, reached out. I just don't have a strategy to lay out or a list of folks that the president might or may not call. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Karine. Just following up on what Stephen was asking about with regard to fentanyl of Admiral Kirby, can we expect some type of trilateral agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and China to tackle this issue?
Don't have anything at this time, any policy announcement to make at this time.
Thank you, as always. I want to ask about...
You might regret it, but go ahead.
I assure you, you will not. I want to ask about polling. In February, the president conducted an interview with, I believe it was Telemundo, and he was asked about the dismal state of his job approval ratings. And he answered in words to this effect, do you know anyone that believes the polling these days? And he talked in some detail about the difficulty of getting people on the phone and compiling accurate polling. Whenever you're asked about the president's dismal job approval ratings, you say we're not going to look at polls. We look at his accomplishments. And yet when you are asked about various domestic policy initiatives, you will say these poll very well. People support what the president wants to do. If you look at the individual subjects on the polling, they support what the president's agenda is. So once and for all, are only certain polls valid in your eyes, the ones that support your agenda? Or is the polling data that shows that President Biden has been stuck for 2 years at the low 40s in his approval ratings, are those valid?
So here's the thing. I think it's important to share that American people do approve of some of the president's initiative. I think it is important. I think it's important for the American people to hear that when it comes to Medicare and fighting and being able to, Medicare to be able to lower costs for the American people. I think it's important to share that. I think it's important to share that that when it comes to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the American people care about that and want us to fight for it, which is what the president. No, it's not. It's not that. It's not that. We are given, anytime I'm asked this question, given an opportunity to speak on what the American people want to hear and what we are doing, right? And so there are moments, just like when you ask me about certain polls, that I can say, hey, you know what? That is something that the American people support. But in more broad terms, in general, we're not focused on every poll. We just are not. It is not important for us that we believe to focus on that. We're going to continue to do the work and work on protecting Medicare and Medicaid and making sure that Americans have their Social Security. And I think by saying that Americans support that, that is important for us to say that from here too, because we are actually delivering for the American people. We're actually doing what the American people want us to do. So when I say that, that's what I'm referring to. The work that we're doing, what we want to deliver on, what the American people care about. And it is the economy. It is lowering costs, right? I always talk about that. The president's number one priority is to continue to lower costs. And I talk about what he has done, whether it's junk fees, whether it's making sure that people have good paying jobs by making sure that we pass these historic legislation that's going to create good union paying jobs. All of those things are connected.
So the polls that show that the electorate at large and also significant majorities within the Democratic Party believe that the president is too old, the polls that show the American people and also significant majorities within the Democratic Party don't want him to run again, and the polls that show his handling of the economy,
This guy's really
foreign
trying to grill
policy,
her. She's not taking
all of
this
these
too well.
dismal polls, his job approval ratings. Does the White House have any basis to challenge the accuracy of that polling?
I'm not challenging the accuracy here. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying to you is that, we're not going to change the minds of Americans. I get that. Americans are going to feel how they feel, and we're going to respect that. And I've said that many times from here. Many times. I said that moments ago. What I can tell you is what our perspective is. What I can tell you is how we see things. And we believe experience, this president having experience to get things done is important. And we know that it's going to take some time, right, for Americans to feel what we have been able to do in this administration, pushing through bipartisan legislation. That is historic. As I mentioned earlier before, this is a president that has done more bipartisan legislation than any other recent president. And so that's what I can speak to. I can speak to our perspective. I can speak to how we see this. I can speak to what is important and how we're going to try to deliver for the American people. And I will say this, just a couple of just data points here. I'm going to be careful not to talk about 2024, any of the elections, but I could look back in history, right? I can look back and see where President Obama was a year out of his election, where President Clinton was a year out ahead of his election. And it didn't look like they were going to win, right? It didn't look like that. And so it is not unusual, you're talking about dismal polling, it's not unusual for a president to be where they are ahead of that. And so, look, the president's going to focus. This is something that I can tell you for sure. He's going to focus on the American people. That is always the number one priority for this president, and that's what you're going to see him continue to do. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right. There we go. All right. Whenever you hear her talk about, I want to be careful not to discuss the 2024 election, she's talking about some kind of amendment to where, at least this is the way the Biden administration is interpreting it, that if they say something concerning the 2024 election, they could be in violation of federal law, which I don't believe is true. However, it's something that they have a serious habit of hiding behind. I find it rather comical. You could tell she's not really good at giving press conferences, in my opinion. She is always very agitated. She's not very affable. She likes to make a habit of being very combative and wanting to argue about everything. And you could tell those questions get under her skin, especially when she was asked about David Axelrod's recent comment. I think it was to the New York Post or New York Times. He basically said that President Joe Biden is too old. Even the Democrats themselves recognize he's too old, and he needs to step aside, and he thinks he can cheat nature. That's just a real direct way to say he needs to step aside, and him not doing so, in his words, is selfish. So stay tuned. We'll have to see how that goes. Some other notes that caught my attention. Unfortunately, Mrs. Rosalind Carter passed away yesterday. If you have not heard, she and her husband, Jimmy Carter, is the first president I can remember in office. I'm 54 years old now. I'm not sure what the first president is that you may remember. If you want, put it down in the comments. I'm curious to see what is the first presidential couple that you remember. I clearly remember as a child that Jimmy Carter was a peanut farmer. The students in my school and just conversations in general was always related to that topic. I knew he was a Christian. I knew he was a good man, and I think of him as a good man. Obviously, I'm not a Democrat by any stretch of the imagination, but him and his wife had a very long and obviously loving relationship. And like everything in life, it does come to an end, but we always, we know that she's in a better place, and I'm sure she's happy right now, and knowing that her husband will be joining her very shortly. Another note, if you were watching one of my videos earlier, I covered President Biden giving a pardon to the two turkeys, as they normally do every year. I think they've been doing that since the late 1800s. That's always kind of cute to see. President Biden is probably not my favorite president. However, I will tell you it's always nice to see tradition from one year to the next being handed down. In relation to the Israel-Gaza war, the White House made the point to say that the administration, that the president is mentioning to Israel in every single conversation they have that citizens must be protected in Gaza. It's really terrible how all these Israelis, all these Jewish people were literally slaughtered in their homes. 40 babies, plus or minus, literally had their heads decapitated. A few thousand, 2,000 plus people probably lost their life just on the Israeli side alone. And there is a lot of hostages right now. Yet you have the world screaming at Israel for doing what they have to do to protect themselves. Unfortunately, if Israel ends up having to kill somebody, even in a hospital, even other babies, that is definitely sad, but it's not Israel's fault. It is the fault of Hamas. You don't agree? Put it in the comments below. Let me hear why you think I'm wrong. She was also talking about the recent summit that President Biden had with the Prime Minister or the President of China, and it is really sad, folks. It's just sad. They're sitting around talking about fentanyl, that is a existential crisis, that is the thing they need to be talking about. Don't you know these Chinese people go home, that their leaders, the president, Xi, goes home, and they are literally laughing at us. We're worried about climate change, in quotes, climate change, the fentanyl crisis, whatever that means. And yet we have a possible world war that can start if it hasn't started already. And yet we're talking about the world being a degree or two hotter. We're talking about stuff that just frankly doesn't matter. We're talking about our military having to have tanks that runs off batteries. What the hell's going on? It's just unbelievable, the nonsense that's going on out there. And it's even crazier that the country is so divided on these issues. I don't know. Sometimes I wake up and I feel like the world's just went crazy. It's just so obvious to me. What do you think? Put in the comments as always. I'm curious what's on your mind. Even Elon Musk. I read what he said. He simply liked a tweet that someone left, and going off my memory here, the person just simply said something to the effect that some Jewish people are using similar tactics against white people. I didn't take that to be anything super nasty. I'm not exactly sure what Elon Musk was talking about, but it is awfully ironic how he says something that may or may not be offensive, yet the White House says nothing when you have members of the so-called squad going around talking about how terrible Israel is and how they should be allowed, or that it was okay for Hamas to attack Israel. And yet you hear nothing. You hear crickets. The Democrats, President Biden, say nothing to all these kooks over in the squad. You know who I'm talking about, them crazy women over there. They won't say nothing. It's just absolute silence. Yet, when it comes to someone like Elon Musk, who's done everything he possibly can in his power to free Twitter, if you will, so it is truly a free speech platform, he makes one comment that may or may not be inappropriate, and you'll never hear the end of it. They just want to go to war with him. Definitely a serious and unfortunate, extremely unfortunate double standard. You could hear the press secretary there. She definitely did not like talking about the polls. And it is true, you can't always rely on the polls. But clearly in the polls, President Biden has very little good news to celebrate. Every poll, especially a recent poll that just came out, shows that individuals, 25 voters, likely voters, 25 and below, are not going to vote for President Biden in the numbers that they voted before. And as a matter of fact, President Trump has taken the lead in most of the polls, if not all the polls. I haven't seen one that did not show President Trump in the lead as far as polls in the last, 7 to 10 days. And then to wrap it up here, I wanted to mention to you that I am working on opening my account and getting it open, I guess the best way to say it, on Reels. So you'll see me on Reels and Rumble very soon. I want to thank everybody who joined me off of Facebook. I got a Twitter, I got some Twitter folks, and I got one or two people on and off on Twitch. So I'm trying to be on all the platforms so that my message my conversation with you can hopefully help you in your day-to-day life. I always enjoy you taking time and appreciate you taking time to join me. It is definitely my honor that you would take time to hear what I have to say. If there's anything I can do for you, always feel free to reach out. Send me an email. It's probably the best way to reach me, simply at reachjrdukes@gmail.com. My friends, I'll be available on and off all day, so make sure you turn that live notification button on and hit that thumbs up. Always remember, keep that free mind and never give up. Until next time, my friends, I am J.R. Dukes.